If I was to ask you how many college football coaching job vacancies there were, or how many switches, changes, whatever the word you want to use is, for the 2024 season, I think that number might surprise you by how big it is. It's 29. 29 programs have a new head coach going into 2024. And of those 29, the overwhelming majority of them are likely to not be the head coach of that program in the next 5 years. It's how quick the turnover is. It's either in 5 years, you've proven yourself good enough to move up the ladder somewhere else, or you've proven yourself bad enough that school, university program doesn't want you to be their head coach anymore. You don't get a lot of time to turn things around anymore. And so with that being said, I think it's an interesting look to see which coaches of new programs are set up to have immediate success in 2024. Which schools are going to look at their head coach after year one and not wonder, did we make a mistake? Did we screw this up? Did we choose the wrong guy? Or maybe we fired somebody that we shouldn't have in retrospect. There are schools that are not going to have to ask that question. Now, for sake of this argument, there of the 29 schools, 6 of them promoted from within. Spencer Danielson at Boise State, Sharon Moore at Michigan, Trent Bray at Oregon State, Major Applewhite at South Alabama, Deshaun Foster at UCLA, and Jay Sauvel at Wyoming. Otherwise, everybody else has somebody that's relatively new to their program. Maybe they were an assistant at that school beforehand or whatever. But for the sake of this argument, right, because like Spencer Danielson got a couple of games as the interim head coach at Boise State last year, led them to a Mountain West title. They're feeling pretty confident about that. Major Applewhite moves up from the South Alabama offensive coordinator job when Kane Womack takes the Alabama defensive coordinator job late in the process. So for this sake, I took those coaches out. To me, there are 3 coaches, programs, universities who are set up to have success in 2024 with a first-year head coach. And I don't think you're going to be surprised by those 3. The first one is obviously Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer coaches Washington to the national championship game last year and takes the Alabama job when Nick Saban retires. And that's going to be somewhat of an ongoing theme. If you're retiring rather than being fired, that's going to make the next guy's chances of being successful a lot higher than if you got fired, because there's a reason you got fired, right? Like nobody is successful and then also worried about their job. Nobody is meeting or exceeding expectations going like, crap. I'm waiting for the Grim Reaper to come get me. So Kalen DeBoer is taking over a playoff team after coaching another playoff team. A very, very, very good coach with a talented roster going into 2024. Now, there's that age-old adage of you don't want to be the man who replaces the man. But I don't know that I'm afraid of that at Alabama. Like, did they make some bad hires in the early 2000s? Yeah. And then they made a really good one. For the overwhelming majority of its program as college football power, Alabama has been really hard to screw up. And I don't know that somebody who has a track record of like ridiculous success everywhere he's been is going to be the guy that screws up Alabama. So I think Kalen DeBoer leads Alabama to a really successful first season. In that same kind of retirement camp, Sean Lewis at San Diego State is set up to have a good first year. Brady Hoke retired. And I don't know if that's a retirement necessarily as much as you might just not want to have been the head coach at San Diego State anymore. But Sean Lewis steps into San Diego State, bright offensive mind. They're going to play a certain brand of football. I think Sean Lewis got a bad rep in a bad deal at Colorado last year. Like, they couldn't block a soul, and that wasn't his fault. They were 1-11 the year before that. You got a bunch of transfers coming in to play offensive line. And So he did what he could to make them competitive, but that didn't highlight Deion Sanders' son. So they made a change, and Sean Lewis becomes the head coach at San Diego State. I think he's in a really good position to challenge Boise State for supremacy in that conference for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sean Lewis is at the top of the group of 5 coaches who are awaiting the call up to Power 5 level. And then finally, Mike Elko at Texas A&M. Part of this is Jimbo Fisher didn't leave that cupboard bare, right? Like, they have talent at Texas A&M, and Mike Elko is familiar with that talent. It's sort of like when a Fortune 500 company hires a CEO that used to work at their Fortune 500 company in the upper levels. You're familiar with that organization. You've had success elsewhere. You know what it's going to take to win and be successful in that organization. I think Mike Elko fits that bill to a T. So those are the 3 that I would say are set up for immediate success. Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, Sean Lewis at San Diego State, Mike Elko at Texas A&M. And I think that there is a big chunk of coaches going into their first season that are in the kind of, the tier I would list it as can be good eventually. Like, for instance, I think Bill O'Brien can be good eventually at Boston College. I just don't know that it's going to be right off the bat. Willie Fritz is a guy who does things differently and isn't afraid to do things differently at Houston. Can be good, I think, eventually. Bronco Mendenhall at New Mexico. New Mexico is not by any stretch a football power. It is a difficult place to win. Your recruiting base at New Mexico is rough. You are basically hoping that kids from West Texas are willing to make the drive to come to your program, because there's not a lot of high school football talent in New Mexico, in southern Colorado, in Arizona, outside of Pahonix. And so you're in a situation where you got to rely on the JUCO route a lot. You've got to rely on probably the transfer portal a lot at New Mexico, but I believe in Bronco Mendenhall. I think Ken Niumatalolo at San Jose State can be successful eventually. I just don't know that that's right away. I think Jonathan Smith and Kurt Cignetti, the coaches at Michigan State and Indiana, are going to elevate the level in the mid-tier of the Big Ten. I think you probably get a little bit more runway at Indiana than a lot of other places. I think John Summerall at Tulane can have them humming a little bit to where he's in that same level as like Sean Lewis at San Diego State, and where you're viewed at Jamie Chadwell at Liberty, where you're viewed as an up-and-comer from the group of 5 that can take over a Power 5 program and get them running. There are a couple of jobs that I would question the coach, question the program. For instance, like Pete Lembo is taking over at Buffalo. Pete Lembo turned Ball State into a pretty good, consistent MAC team when he was the head coach there. And he just never jumped at the opportunity to move away from Ball State until it got to be too late. Takes a Power 5 assistant job at South Carolina, and now is coming back to the MAC, and is, I think, a really good coach. But Buffalo is going to be a difficult place to win. It's the similar situation at Duke. Manny Diaz got, I think, a raw deal at Miami, because what has transpired since he left hasn't been necessarily inspiring to think that they made 100% the right choice. Duke's a difficult place to win. David Cutcliffe and Mike Elko did it, but David Cutcliffe is a very, very, very good football coach, and Mike Elko wasn't there all that long. Can Manny Diaz turn that into a program that can be respectable, a constant bowl contender, and once every 5 years or so compete for the ACC title? I don't know. Del McGee at Georgia State took the job. Like, Sean Elliott left Georgia State during spring practice. Like, that is not a situation where you are set up to succeed when another coach had already started spring practice for your program. So, and Georgia State hasn't had a ton of success yet. Can they? Is Del McGee the right guy to get him off the mat? I don't know. But I think it's an interesting look at that first year because it fluctuates, right? You can have a fantastic first year. You can have a flash in the pan that makes everybody go like, holy cow, this guy's going to have them humming. And then it just doesn't sustain that success. And you can be the other way where that first year is a rough one. Matt Rule generally has a bad first year at his new program. And then the second year, look out for Nebraska in 2024. But I don't think Kalen DeBoer, Sean Lewis, Mike Elko at Alabama, San Diego State, and Texas A&M are going to be flashes in the pan. I think they are good programs at good coaches at good programs in situations to succeed immediately and have sustained success. And we'll see whether that plays out as we inch closer and closer and closer to the 2024 college football season. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are so inclined, hit the thumbs up button. Gets us in front of more college football fans. And I think more college football fans. It's always a great thing. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode here of the Daily Huddle.